Good morning. Homicide detectives have spent the night interviewing people at a Brisbane park where a French exchange student was found murdered exactly 1 week ago. Today, reporter Lauren Ellis joins us from Brisbane. And Lauren, are police any closer to solving this mystery?
Good morning, Georgie. Well, last night police said the search at this unit complex behind me was a critical part of the murder investigation. Detectives were seen entering the complex. They were inside for around 1 hour before they left with bags of evidence, and a man believed to be in his 20s was also seen assisting police with their inquiry.
By your actions, a beautiful young woman has died. She was a young, vibrant woman with her life ahead of her, a young woman with hopes and dreams.
Welcome to the channel. But before we dive in, friends, if you end up liking this video, please hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. Also, drop a comment letting me know what city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm super curious to see where my audience is tuning in from. Alright, now let's get started. So, friends, welcome to Brisbane. This is a vibrant city on the east coast of Australia, famous for its warm vibe and sunny weather. You can take a stroll along the Brisbane River, check out the botanical gardens, or visit some modern art galleries. If you're into staying active, there are plenty of parks and chances to try water sports. And food lovers? You're in luck. Brisbane has a rich foodie scene with cozy cafes, restaurants, and local markets. Plus, it's the perfect starting point if you want to explore the Gold Coast or the Sunshine Coast. Now, let's go back to March 28th, 2014. That's when our story begins. Over Kilpa Park, a heavy storm had just rolled through. The night had brought a long, soaking rain, drenching the ground, the paths, and the benches, turning this usually lively spot into a quiet, almost deserted place. On normal days, athletes would be jogging, dogs would be out for walks, friends would meet up, and people would just hang by the river. But in those early March morning hours, the park felt unnaturally empty and muted, like it was holding its breath after the storm. The few people who were passing by noticed a woman lying on a bench under a shelter by the river, between Gert Bridges and William Jolly Bridge. At first glance, it looked like she was just sleeping, trying to hide from the rain. Her body was still, and her posture seemed strangely peaceful, like she'd dozed off from exhaustion. Many assumed she was homeless and just walked on by, not stopping or asking any questions. Unfortunately, scenes like this weren't uncommon in that area. It wasn't until later that someone decided to check if she was okay. Sources later disagreed on the details. Some said it was a morning runner, others thought it was a homeless man who often hung out in the park. When the newspaper and jacket she was covered with were gently pulled back, the scene changed dramatically. It became clear that the woman was naked. There were obvious signs of brutal beating on her body. She had been sexually assaulted, and her personal belongings were gone. She'd been robbed. There were no signs of life. No pulse, no breathing. Attempts to revive her continued, but they didn't work. She was dead. Soon, the area lit up with flashing lights. Emergency crews had arrived. The park, which just moments ago had been quiet and empty, now looked like a full-blown crime scene. The perimeter was secured, and an official homicide investigation got underway. Even though the woman's identity wasn't known yet, the officers immediately got a clear sense of where to start. Experience was guiding their first moves. They headed over to the Oscar homeless shelter, located not far from Kilpa Park. This place had a strict curfew, 9 p.m, and breaking the rules could get residents asked to leave. The police needed to make sure everyone was accounted for and in their beds. During the check, they discovered that one man was missing. He hadn't returned for several nights, and what made it even more alarming was that he'd left all of his belongings behind. This immediately caught the investigators' attention and became one of the first key leads in the case.
Today, reporter Lauren Ellis joins us from Brisbane. And Lauren, are police any closer to solving this mystery?
Good morning, Georgie. Well, last night police said the search at this unit complex behind me was a critical part of the murder investigation. Detectives were seen entering the complex. They were inside for around 1 hour before they left with bags of evidence, and a man believed to be in his 20s was also seen assisting police with their inquiries.
Thousands of miles away, in France, a man was sitting at his computer in the kind of quiet that almost feels ordinary. He was scrolling through social media, casually checking news and posts, not suspecting that in just a few seconds his life would split into a before and after. Then, his eyes landed on a post that made him freeze. The Brisbane police had shared a post with photos of jewellery that belonged to a young woman whose identity they were trying to confirm. The short message said she had been found dead in one of the local parks. The images were clear and emotionless, but somehow That's what hit the hardest. 21-year-old Sophie Colbay, her name, which had been part of his everyday life just yesterday, was now appearing in the context of a police investigation and a murder report. On the other side of the world, far from Brisbane, the truth found him through a computer screen, leaving nothing but shock, silence, and the crushing awareness of an irreparable loss.
Police have confirmed that they believe it was a foreign exchange student from France that was found on the banks of the Brisbane River and that she had been living here for around 1 year. And this breakthrough came after police received a phone call from the victim's boyfriend and also friend who both said that she was missing. Now, police divers yesterday spent hours scouring the banks of the Brisbane River and also looking through CCTV footage from neighbouring businesses in the hope of identifying a suspect. At this stage, as you said, the woman's body is yet to be formally identified, but it is the third foreign exchange student to have been murdered in Brisbane in the last 4 months. Georgie?
All right, Lauren Ellis, thank you.
Sophie was originally from France. She grew up there, but she always dreamed of more than the usual predictable life. Studying in Australia was a big step for her. It was the fulfillment of a long-time dream. In February of the previous year, she arrived in Brisbane on a student visa and enrolled at Griffith University, full of hopes, plans, and a quiet determination to test herself in a new country. She was a true adventurer, a person who wasn't afraid to step out of her comfort zone. She especially missed her boyfriend, Boris. For a while, he had been with her in Australia, and those months were an important support for her. But his visa ran out, and when Boris had to return home, Sophie felt just how lonely her everyday life had become. She decided that eventually she would go back to Europe too. To make that plan a reality, Sophie worked tirelessly. She was determined to save as much money as possible, taking on any work she could find. She went door to door selling things, taught French, accepted temporary jobs, and worked long hours. She did it all with one goal in mind, to save enough to return home. According to her plan, that was supposed to happen in June. Even with her busy schedule, Sophie stayed in constant touch with her family. She wrote letters, shared updates, and tried to reassure her loved ones that she was okay. On March 16th, she sent an email to her mom. It was warm, ordinary, and carried no hints of worry. At the end, she added kisses, just like she always did. At the time, no one could have known it would be her last message. That was the last time her mother would hear her daughter's voice, even if only through words on a screen. On March 27th, Sophie was heading home after an evening class at Griffith University. The class had ended around 8:30 in the evening. She was in a bit of a hurry, thinking about getting home and the usual everyday stuff. One of her classmates offered her a ride, but she declined. Together with a friend, she got on a bus heading to the Cultural Centre terminal. That's where their paths split. This friend would turn out to be the last person to see Sophie alive. After getting off the bus and saying goodbye to her friend, Sophie was on her own. She carried an umbrella and a bag as she made her way to her apartment on Quay Street, walking along her familiar route by the Brisbane River. The night was damp from the rain, the air heavy and cool, and the streets much quieter than usual. It was a path she had walked many times before, almost automatically, thinking about home, warmth, and rest. Surveillance cameras captured her just before 9 o'clock in the evening near Keilor Bridge. On the footage, she looked normal, showing no signs of panic or fear. This is the last confirmed moment when Sophie was still safe. What happened after that remained a mystery. Between those frames and the place where she was later found, there's a dark, empty gap. But the police knew one thing for sure: the attack had been brutal and extremely violent, and from where she was last seen, her apartment was already in sight. Home was just around the corner. The autopsy revealed the scale and horrifying nature of her injuries. Her body bore evidence of extreme violence. Bruises under her eyes, multiple contusions on her elbows, arms, and legs, all signs of a struggle. There were injuries along her spine, and small puncture wounds on her buttocks and feet. Each of these injuries was serious on its own, but together they painted a chilling picture of what she had endured. The cause of death was severe head trauma. She had suffered brain hemorrhaging and skull fractures that were incompatible with life. Overall, experts documented 128 external injuries on her body. That number shocked even the most experienced investigators and medical examiners, who had seen some of the worst cases before. The most disturbing part was that when people walked past, Sophie had still been alive, lying naked in the cold, covered only by newspapers and a jacket. She was clinging to life, barely noticeable to anyone nearby. In fact, she survived for several hours after the attack, alone, without help, hovering between life and death. "This is disgusting. You watch car crashes, they're terrible and sudden enough," Detective Inspector Rod Kemp told reporters. "But when someone is beaten and tortured like this, it's just shameful." His words reflected not just a professional assessment of what he'd seen, but also a deep shock at the sheer scale of the violence that took a young woman's life just steps from her home.
Police have released security footage of 21-year-old French student Sophie Colombet in the moments leading up to her murder. It's been almost a week since the business student was bashed to death beside the river in South Brisbane. More police will patrol the area overnight as the hunt for her killer intensifies.
You would think there was a lot of people around, albeit it was raining heavily. So, yeah, no, it's shocking.
Police divers found her umbrella in the Brisbane River. They're still looking for her clothes, boots, handbag and possibly her smartphone and tablet. But what was the motive behind the murder? Police say at this stage there's no evidence to suggest the killer was known to Miss Colombet and are treating this as an opportunistic attack.
I don't think there's anything to suggest you could put a tag of a foreign student on. I think she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Foot patrols have been bolstered around the park and officers are interviewing walkers in the hope of finding a new lead. News of the murder has made headlines in Sophie's hometown in northern France. Overseas reports are calling her death mysterious. Back home, uni students from across Brisbane are planning a vigil in the coming days.
We're deeply saddened by this and we're having this vigil next Thursday night in memory of her, to honour her.
And during a meeting with the French ambassador, the Premier offered his condolences and assistance to the Colombet family. They're now arranging the heartbreaking return home of her body. Josh Bavis, ABC News, Brisbane.
The investigation into Sophie's murder quickly turned into a massive police operation. Over 60 officers were brought in, working around the clock, chasing down every possible lead. But key evidence was catastrophically lacking. They never found her clothes, the weapon used was never recovered, and at that point, there were no obvious suspects. The case was made even more difficult by the fact that the attack happened at night, without any witnesses, leaving investigators with only fragments of information and haunting questions with no answers. News of her murder spread fast across Brisbane, sending shockwaves through the city. A place many considered relatively calm and safe was suddenly confronted with a brutal reality. Outrage was everywhere. In conversations, in the news, on the streets, people couldn't understand how such violence could happen right in a residential area. Those who knew Sophie personally were completely devastated. For them, this wasn't some abstract story from a crime report, it was the loss of a real, close person. Her roommate remembered Sophie as kind, gentle, and very quiet. She spoke of her through tears, struggling to find the words to explain what had happened. Who on this earth would want to hurt her? She asked, and that question hung in the air unanswered. In the days following her death, Kilper Park began to change. At the spot where Sophie was found, an impromptu memorial appeared. People came quietly, leaving flowers, candles, and notes. It was spontaneous but heartfelt, a collective expression of grief. Sophie became the 4th international student murdered in that area in recent times. While police insisted these murders weren't connected, the situation was officially deemed extremely concerning. People started asking serious questions about safety, especially for young women and students from abroad. Queensland's Premier, Campbell Newman, issued a statement insisting that it was safe for visitors from other countries to be here. But for many, his words felt empty against the backdrop of a fresh tragedy that had left a deep mark on the city's heart. "I believe it's safe here not just for international students, but for Brisbane students too," he said, trying to reassure the public. Fortunately, in the other cases, the perpetrators were caught. Despite his assurances, tension didn't ease. The police continued their painstaking work, combing the crime scene over and over, checking every detail. At the same time, investigators began reviewing the surveillance footage from that night with even greater scrutiny. They were looking for any movement, any shadow, any silhouette that could shed light on the last hours of Sophie's life. It was slow, exhausting work, but eventually it paid off. And, indeed, the cameras captured something significant. On the footage appeared a man whose presence immediately caught the investigators' attention. This was the same man whose absence from the homeless shelter couldn't be explained. He was recorded in the same area where Sophie had been that night, at a time that aligned with the key moments of the investigation. His name was Benjamin James Millard, and just like that, his name quickly became central to the case. Benjamin had a long criminal history. His record included burglary and violent crimes, although he had no previous sexual offences. He had been in and out of the justice system multiple times. In December 2012, he was released from prison after serving time for an assault. Later, he was detained again for violating parole conditions, and then released once more in July of the previous year. On top of that, his background included drug offences, public order violations, and robberies. He was someone who had lived on the edge of the law for years, repeatedly returning to a life of crime. For investigators, these facts weren't direct proof, but they created a disturbing context. On his Facebook page, under the name Probation Sucks, Benjamin posted content that reflected his attitude toward the system. One post in particular caught attention. Probation easy. Jail and parole lame. On probation, life simple.
Look, as part of the investigation, the ongoing investigation into the death of Sophie Colombe, detectives have identified a number of persons of interest or witnesses surrounding this matter, and we're currently asking for the public, in particular a certain person who we believe was at the scene around the time of, we believe, when Sophie was killed, and that person we wish to give to the public through the media, if I may. His name's Benjamin James Millward. He is 25 years of age. He's 180 centimetres, proportionate build. He has a dragon tattoo on the left side of his chest. Short, fair hair, hazel eyes. This person has come to our notice through speaking to other witnesses and examining CCTV in the area. We've asked people if they know this person, perhaps not to approach him. We don't know what his involvement is in the matter at this stage, but he is a person that we wish to speak to. His involvement in the matter at this stage, the totality of it, we're not sure of. But obviously for personal safety, if people know this person, if they could contact Crime Stoppers or the Dutton Park CIB. I would advise people not to approach him. If he is involved in this matter, then clearly he could be a risk. And obviously it'd be easier or better if members of the public could contact Crime Stoppers or the Dutton Park Criminal Investigation Branch.
Patrols across the city were immediately ramped up. The police worked almost non-stop, trying not to waste a single moment. Local residents and business owners in the surrounding areas were shown photos of Benjamin in the hope that someone might have seen him that night or in the days that followed. His face appeared on screens, in police briefings, and on flyers. The city was slowly realizing that the manhunt was in full swing. Surveillance footage helped piece together part of his route. Cameras captured Benjamin boarding a train at South Brisbane Station at 11:23 that night. The time was logged down to the second, making it a crucial point in the timeline. The train arrived at the terminal station, Bowen Hills, where he was caught on camera again. On the footage, he looked tense and nervous, moving quickly without lingering anywhere. From there, he headed toward Abbotsford Road. Whether he was fleeing consciously or just trying to disappear from view remained unknown. Investigators believed he spent that night somewhere near the airport. Later, according to available information, he boarded the airport train and headed toward Varsity Lakes. After that, his movements became increasingly unclear. It's thought that he travelled partly on foot and sometimes hitched rides, making his way toward Ballina. Each stage only reinforced the impression that he was trying to break free from the city and avoid attention. Meanwhile, his family joined the search. His cousin reached out to him on Facebook, posting a public message in hopes of reaching him. "If anyone has seen my beloved cousin Benny, please contact the police. Love you, Benny. Everything's gonna be okay." The post quickly circulated online, serving as yet another emotional reminder that this case went far beyond police reports. His brother Josh also urged Benjamin to make contact and cooperate with investigators to clear his name. Joining these appeals was his mother, Diane. Her words were especially painful and heartfelt. "We love you. Ben, please come home," she said. "Why don't you call us to sort this out? Sophie's family needs this. They need to know." She added that she didn't believe he was guilty of what he was being accused of, and that all she wanted was the truth and some clarity. Her words reflected the complex mix of a mother's love and the heavy reality of the situation. At the same time, Sophie's family was dealing with their own grief. They were deeply moved by the sheer amount of support coming from all directions. Sophie's brother Gam spoke about it with gratitude, despite the tragedy. The French embassy, the police, town hall, people all across Australia did absolutely everything they could to help in any way. They even made a website for us here in Australia where people leave messages and they get translated into French. French people living in Australia are offering support to so many. Right now, the main thing is to get her home as soon as possible. His words highlighted not only the scale of international support, but also the family's single most important goal, saying goodbye to her with dignity and bringing her back home. Across the country, a massive manhunt was underway. Every piece of information was checked without pause, and not a single detail, no matter how small, was ignored. Police collaborated across states, matched timelines, followed up on citizen tips, and meticulously analysed every lead. The tension grew with each passing day as the public demanded answers and Sophie's family sought justice. Soon, investigators got their first major breakthrough. On April 7th, a hostel in Ballina contacted the police, reporting that Benjamin had stayed there a few nights earlier. This tip was crucial. Investigators quickly confirmed it, and also discovered that he had registered with an employment agency in Coffs Harbour, New South Wales. His movements were starting to form a clearer picture, and the net around him began to tighten. Officers were immediately sent to Coffs Harbour. The operation moved quickly and quietly. Less than 2 weeks after Sophie's murder, Benjamin James Millard was taken into custody. His arrest was a relief for many, but it was only the beginning of the next phase of the case. During questioning, Benjamin told police that he remembered only parts of what happened that night. His statements were fragmented and sometimes contradictory. At the same time, during his arrest, he made a remark that immediately went into the official reports, and later the news headlines. "What I did, it's terrible. I didn't want anything to happen." He also told police that he considered himself somewhat of a sex addict. These words didn't answer the investigators' questions, but they underscored just how complex and disturbing the case was. Soon, he was extradited back to Queensland, where he was set to face the police and the state's judicial system. Meanwhile, the outrage and disgust that so many people felt didn't stay just as emotions, they turned into action. Over 2,000 people took to the streets of Brisbane, marching and holding a candlelight vigil in memory of Sophie. It was a quiet, yet powerful display of grief and solidarity. People walked side by side, candles in hand, many of them in silence, struggling to find the words. The president of the Postgraduate Student Association at Griffith University, where Sophie had studied, addressed the crowd. He spoke not just as a representative of the university, but as someone who had known her personally. He recalled her laughter, her openness, and her vibrant spirit, those qualities that had made her stand out. "It's been 6 months, and that laughter is gone," he said. "We all know the usual safety rules, but nothing could have prepared us for this. We owe it to Sophie to make Brisbane a safe city, not just on paper, but in real life." After his words, the participants followed a group of bagpipers. Their slow, mournful music echoed over the city. The march led people to Cara Park, where they stopped to light their candles. The flames flickered in the night air, and the silence around them became another reminder of a life cruelly cut short, and of the promise to never forget. It was clear just how deeply this tragedy had shaken not only the people of Brisbane, but the surrounding regions and all of Australia. The response was massive and heartfelt, from quiet conversations on the streets to large public gatherings and official statements. Grief and outrage knew no borders, and for many, this story felt like a personal loss. The organizer of the vigil pointed out that the sheer number of people who came out sent a clear message: Brisbane will not stay silent about violence against women. "Violence against women happens, and it's absolutely unacceptable," she said. "These events are important not just for awareness, but to show support to her family, who are thousands of miles away, on the other side of the world. They need to know Sophie hasn't been forgotten." One participant added words that struck a chord with many. "She was someone's daughter. She was someone's sister. She's a daughter and sister to all of us." Eventually, Sophie's body was returned to France for her funeral. This moment marked a painful end to her journey far from home. Over 1,200 people gathered in her hometown to see her off. The streets were filled with silent mourning. Her parents, Gian and Corin, and her brothers Elle and Gam, led the funeral procession, accompanied by 50 of Sophie's closest friends. Her boyfriend, Boris, walked alongside them. They all carried long-stemmed carnations, simple flowers heavy with meaning. Along the route, subdued sobs occasionally broke the silence. Members of the music club where Sophie had been a lead flutist provided the ceremonial music. Their playing was restrained and moving, supporting each other quietly, reminding themselves that they were doing it for Sophie and trying to stay composed. Next to a photo of Sophie hugging a koala at Brisbane's Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, 8 condolence books were filled with messages. The pages reflected just how many people her story had touched. Meanwhile, the legal side of the case kept moving forward. Benjamin Millward was officially charged with unlawful confinement, armed robbery, sexual assault, and murder. The wording of these charges sounded dry and formal, but behind each word lay the tragedy of a real person's life. Soon, a preliminary hearing was held, where the magistrate had to decide whether there was enough evidence to send the case to a higher court. These pieces of evidence, along with witness testimonies, allowed investigators to reconstruct the timeline and move closer to a trial that could finally provide answers for Sophie's family and the entire community. Benjamin told police that he remembered almost nothing from that night because of the drugs he had taken, yet he admitted to sexually assaulting Sophie. He clarified that he didn't have any weapons with him, but he recalled beating her, and that his actions were violent and brutal. That evening, he had injected crystal meth and consumed a large amount of wine, beer, and bourbon, creating a state of heavy intoxication and drug influence that, according to him, severely reduced his self-control. One of the residents at the Oscar shelter, named Justin, had supplied Benjamin with the drugs. That night, they met again near the waterfront rotunda and used more substances. A witness who had also taken drugs with Benjamin that evening noted that the drugs didn't completely erase memory. "I still remember what I'm doing. It doesn't really affect memory, more like endurance. You're fully aware of what you can and can't do." He added that the amount of drugs taken was extremely high, enough that their impact on behavior and self-control was serious. Shortly before 9 p.m., Sophie was walking toward the rotunda, returning home after her evening class. It was at this time that Benjamin attacked her violently, sexually assaulted her, and beat her while she was still struggling to survive. He told her he would get help, but he didn't. Instead, he threw her personal belongings into the river and fled the scene. According to him, he panicked and initially planned to catch a train to Ipswich, leaving her in danger. In the end, he chose not to, deciding instead to go to Coffs Harbour in New South Wales. Forensic experts collected DNA samples from under Sophie's fingernails. The probability that these samples belonged to Benjamin was 1.1 million times higher than to anyone else. These results became some of the most critical evidence in the case, almost undeniably placing him at the scene of the attack. The evidence spoke for itself, its strength becoming clear to investigators and attorneys alike. After the preliminary hearings concluded, all that remained was to await the start of the trial. But even before the case reached court, public attention and media coverage did not wane. Sophie's story remained in the spotlight, and everyone awaited a just verdict that could finally bring closure to this horrific tragedy.
French student Sophie Colombe in Brisbane in 2014 has pleaded guilty to raping and murdering her.
Benjamin's lawyer stated that his client sincerely regretted what he had done. He also wrote a letter of apology to Sophie's family, attempting to express at least some form of remorse for that horrific night that had forever changed so many lives. In the courtroom, Benjamin appeared visibly emotional. He sat in darkness with his head bowed, tears streaming down his face, his posture conveying deep disappointment in himself and the situation he had caused. Sophie's family had travelled to Australia to be present for the sentencing. They felt every moment of the hearing intensely. As victim impact statements were read aloud, tears rolled down the faces of her parents and brothers. Their expressions were full of grief, sorrow, and at the same time, hope for justice. In those moments, the silence of the courtroom felt heavy and impenetrable, and the emotions of everyone present, investigators, lawyers, family members, and media, were intensely charged. Every word spoken during the statements echoed with Sophie's tragedy, a stark reminder that her life had been cruelly taken, and that justice was finally reaching its long-awaited conclusion.
Bays flew across the world for today, but it's a different world to the one they once knew.
The day they've learned of Sophie's demise, the world collapsed around them and has never been the same since.
Sophie Colombe was a 21-year-old French student studying abroad. As Millward was taken away, he said, "I'm so sorry" to Sophie's family, an apology that wasn't accepted.
They want to soldier on and they want to try and get on with their life as best they can.
Brisbane's Lord Mayor met the Colombes this afternoon and they've received cards, flowers and letters.
Sophie's boyfriend, Boris, had left Australia only 6 weeks before her tragic death. Losing the woman he loved was a devastating blow, and to cope with the pain, he turned to sleeping pills and sedatives. His life changed drastically, and memories of Sophie became a constant source of sorrow and emptiness. Finally, the day of sentencing arrived. The courtroom was thick with tension and anticipation. Benjamin Millard was sentenced to life imprisonment for Sophie's murder, with a non-parole period of 20 years. Additionally, he received 15 years for the sexual assault, with both sentences to be served concurrently. This verdict marked the culmination of months of investigation and trial, a long-awaited moment of justice. Supreme Court Justice Anne Lyons, in remarks recorded on video for the first time in Queensland history, emphasized the severity of the crime, its relentless brutality, and the magnitude of the trauma Benjamin inflicted. She also highlighted the need to send a clear message to the public. Violence against women will not go unpunished. Every word she spoke, captured on video, became a historic moment, reflecting both Sophie's tragedy and the justice system's determination to uphold the law.
She died not far from this courthouse. I can see the spot from my room. This young woman died at your hands. You have caused her death. It is so hard to understand how you could have acted in that way. The sentence I'm about to impose denounces publicly your conduct and communicates to you society's absolute condemnation of your conduct. You attacked a defenceless woman. You showed her no respect. You attacked her inherent dignity as a person. You attacked her dignity as a woman. You treated her appallingly and then left her. You walked away. I understand the term in French is réclusion criminelle à perpétuité. In either language, the meaning is clear. You will forever be serving a sentence of life imprisonment.
To ensure Sophie's memory would live on, a memorial was created featuring mountains and a butterfly. The mountains symbolized the landscapes she had loved, the views from her home in France, a reminder of her roots and the places she cherished. Her brother, Gam, shared that he requested the butterfly after seeing one nearby just days after Sophie's death. As he looked at it, he silently sought comfort, and the butterfly landed on his hand for several minutes, as if a messenger of peace and a link to Sophie. This small, quiet sign became a symbol of hope and remembrance for the family. In cases like this, what always stands out is the response from Australia. People take to the streets, showing solidarity and compassion even for someone they never knew personally. With Sophie, it was no different. Hundreds, even thousands of people came together in grief, honouring her life and reinforcing that violence is unacceptable. The realization that Sophie had remained alive after the attack, yet passed by unnoticed by others, was devastating for everyone involved in the investigation and for those who loved her from afar. She had been an extraordinary young woman, fearless, curious, never shying away from any challenge, big or small. Sophie embraced life with an open heart and a radiant, genuine smile. As her family said of her, "Your life was always about kindness, boundless energy and happiness, and about a simple smile that never faded from your face. Sophie, may you be our daughter, our sister, our love, and our friend. You will appear in every flicker, in every little flower, and in every sunrise of a new day." These words became not only an expression of grief, but a lasting pledge of remembrance. Sophie remained in the hearts of those who knew her and those who never met her, a symbol of light, joy, and an unbreakable spirit.